This webinar is brought to you by us, by Endeva, in collaboration with EVPA, and it's part of an initiative by DFID that is called Inclusive Business Boost, and I think someone from Inclusive Business Boost will also join us. It's based on a publication that was put out earlier in the year, which is called Make or Buy, and yeah, I'm very happy to welcome my co-panelists in the virtual room. So the agenda is quite simple. We have 3 presentations today. I will provide a summary of the report to give some structure to this topic of corporate impact venturing. Then Christophe Poline is here from Schneider Electric. They have a lot of experience with different types of corporate impact venturing funds, and he will share from that rich experience. And then finally, there's Karoline Heitmann from European Venture Philanthropy Association. She's doing research on corporate social investing and the role of corporates in venture philanthropy, and will provide her perspective. And then the last part is open for discussion. Maybe you can already open your chat windows in Zoom. So you see what's going on in the chat. And please, if you have a question along the way, put your question into the chat and we will address them then when there's a good time, because there will be around 30 people on the line. It's proven more effective to keep yourselves muted and we interact via the chat. And Megan, who's also here, will help me to make sure that all questions are being addressed. Jessica Souriau from Engie, who also wanted to join the conversation today, apologizes. There's a strike happening in France, and so she couldn't get to work, and her kindergarten is closed. She's at home with her baby, so that's a good excuse. Yeah, I think we have also quite some expertise on the line that we could be drawing on during the panel conversation. So with this, let me start with a quick introduction to the topic. And first of all, to us as Endeva, we are a company of experts dedicated to what we call an inclusive transformation. So our ambition is to make the global economic transformation work for everyone, especially those that are excluded. We nurture the businesses of the future that tackle today's challenges. We support our partners that come from a range of backgrounds to become future fit, so to find their role in this transformation, and we facilitate collaboration among different actors or systems change for the SDGs. We do that based on 12 years of experience in inclusive business and inclusive business ecosystems, having collaborated with a wide range of partners from large companies to startups, social enterprises, donors, NGOs, foundations and academia, the whole range. And we work with a global network of more than 350 experts. So yeah, we're very, let's say, we're a network of experts around the globe. The team here today is me. I'm the lead author of this publication, and Megan, who is the co-author. I'm founder and managing director of Endeva, and have been looking at topics around inclusive businesses and sustainability for more than 17 years now. I work with a number of large companies as well as social enterprises. So the space of collaboration between the large companies and the startups really interests me. And it really interests Megan as well. Megan, do you very briefly want to say something about yourself?
Sure. Hi. Yeah, so I'm a project manager and consultant. I've been with Endeva for 5 years or so, almost. My personal interest is on the role of digital innovations and inclusion. And yeah, I do this also through projects like supporting the Make IT Alliance, which is a large group of corporates based in Germany and around Europe that are interested in supporting tech initiatives in the global sphere.
Yeah, Thanks. Yeah, so we also really see this interest of the large companies in startups increasing, and also in startups that are not your typical copycat from Silicon Valley, but do interesting stuff in developing countries. Just a note that all the pictures that you will see in my presentation are from the report that is also available for download on our website. So first of all, what do we understand as corporate impact venturing? It is broadly the practice of taking equity in impact ventures with the prospect of generating financial, strategic, social, and or environmental returns. So it's this triangle of objectives that comes together with corporate impact venturing. Corporate venturing is always financial and strategic, and then the impact is added in here. And in this publication, we looked specifically at corporate impact venturing at the base of the pyramid, so in low-income markets, in developing and emerging countries, and all the examples are from that context. One example, just to give you a sense what we're talking about, is from Engie, and I'm quoting Jessica here since she's not here. So Engie has set its purpose to provide energy for all, and to realize that the purpose, they've set up an investment fund called Rassembleurs d'Engie in 2011, which invests in clean and sustainable energy in low-income markets. It started with only 10 million and was later raised to 50 million, and invests minority shares and quasi-equity in companies. At the time it was 20 companies. There's a really nice story from that fund. So one of the investees is Phoenix, which is provides solar home systems in Uganda and other countries in Africa. And this business was so interesting commercially that later on it was absorbed by the commercial part of the business. So you can see how like impact venturing can also be mainstreamed into the main business. This is not the purpose of this particular fund. They are really focusing on the social impact, but of course it's also a way to bring the social impact consideration closer to the core business in a way that's interesting to people who otherwise don't think so much about the world's problems, but are keenly interested in the next business model of their companies. In this publication, Make or Buy, basically we started with the question, when should you make and when should you buy? Having worked in the space of inclusive business for such a long time now, we have mainly supported large companies on the make end, and many companies, when they decide to venture to the base of the pyramid, automatically feel that that they need to make it. And with this publication, we wanted to point out that there's also the route to buy, which is often the better route for corporates when it comes to innovations, and also quite a standard route in mainstream business when companies want to acquire new innovations, because large corporates are very well set up to operate efficiently and at scale, but sometimes not so well up to be radically innovative and go to completely new spaces. So it's the same in the impact space, maybe even more so, because the low-income markets are very, very different from the environments where large companies usually operate in most cases, and therefore it has proven quite difficult for them to be successful at the base of the pyramid. So over these 12 years of looking at the space, we've seen a lot of failures and a lot of initiatives that have stayed small. And so this work is also growing out of a of a certain frustration, but also of an optimism that this combination of the startups that are working hard to develop new business models and large companies can be highly efficient to bring these two strengths and complementarities together. And what we've seen when we look closer at the examples we found is that actually companies can achieve all the classic objectives that drive venturing into low-income markets, also when they buy. What we recommend is that before companies set up a certain way to invest in low-income markets, they are very clear about what objectives they want to realize and what is the best structure for that. So if it's mainly about accessing new markets, then buying is often the wiser choice, because you can buy into a company that already has a presence and has a proven business model. And this is especially true when you want to venture into entirely new markets where you don't have your own footprint. Driving innovation to get future fit, and I'm now always looking more at the right side of the buy when you want to column. You can acquire innovations externally, and you also can bring an innovators and an innovation culture into the company from the outside, which is one goal that many large, old, established companies have, is to refresh by buying fresh companies from the outside. Strengthen the supply chain and wider ecosystem. One interesting example that I wanted to mention here is the Danone Ecosystem Fund, which has been set up by Danone to strengthen really the ecosystem. So they invest in initiatives around recycling to address their goal to become waste positive, and other initiatives that are really not in their core, and they will never be probably part of the core, but they help the core business to thrive. So also an interesting approach to invest around the core business. Recruit and retain talent is often a driver for making in-house, to support entrepreneurs and to use that talent in-house, and it's a very good reason to do that. You can also have HR benefits from venturing externally, and in fact, all the examples we found bring their employees into the ventures they invest in as mentors or in other capacities, to get them out of the company and give them a new experience, and of course also to strengthen their investees. And then lastly, realize a company purpose. It's quite a wide objective, but it's very it's becoming ever more important for companies to be clear what contribution they are making to society. So like in the example of Rassembleurs and Engie, Engie has mainly done this to be true to their purpose. And the other thing to look at when you decide whether to make or when to buy is whether you have the capacity for both. So the main reason we've seen for large companies' BOP initiatives to struggle is that it's not necessarily the market environment, it's the constraints inside the company that make it difficult. So a lack of structure for these quite unusual initiatives, and not enough leadership attention somehow to protect these initiatives in-house. So again, it could be easier if you buy externally, allows you to be more experimental and to also be a bit more at arm's length, so you don't have to be so involved. And the same holds true for finance. One reason a number of companies have chosen to set up funds, for example, is so they don't have these investments on their balance sheets, because they might be profitable and commercially viable, but don't comply with the margins that have been set inside the large company. And then lastly, information and skills is a major issue inside the large companies. It's not the classic skill set that you would usually find to drive these BOP initiatives. And when you venture externally, you buy this talent externally. It also helps you to learn about these BOP markets that you might not know. So this is the basic make or buy decision. In terms of how to do it, if you decide to buy externally, it's just like in other corporate venturing. There's three options. You can either invest directly from the balance sheet. You can set up a self-managed fund where you as the company act as the general partner. Or you can set up a third-party fund that is managed externally, and as the company you're the limited partner. In our review, we found a few examples for direct investment. One is Engro Foundation, and I hope that Fawad is also on the line. Fawad, I might ping you later on. Then self-managed fund, there's quite a number of interesting examples. Beside Rassembleurs d'Engie and Danone Ecosystem Fund that I've already mentioned, there's also Danone Communities. There's the Pearson Affordable Learning Fund, and there's the Schneider Electric Energy Access Fund, which we will hear more about from Poline and just Christophe in just a few minutes. And on the third-party fund, again, Schneider Electric has a nice example. Danone has one as well. And there's one interesting example in the UK, Founders Factory Africa, where basically an independent group has set up this fund and has brought partners on board from companies as limited partners, as well as donors, to invest in a range of startups in Africa that are strategic for the limited partners' interests. Yeah, so that's for the structures. Very quickly, on who is out there to help. For many companies that start this is quite new. We have not, interestingly, seen examples where companies have used their in-house corporate venture departments to build this, but usually it's been built from scratch. The people we spoke to didn't always find it so easy to know what is the best way to set it up or how to find investees. So we also looked for who are the organizations out there that can support this. On the one hand, to build a strategy and structures in the beginnings. Of course, there's consultancies out there, and also the impact investors can be useful, especially in building these fund structures. They can also be very useful to identify investees because they already have vetted portfolios. There it can also be relevant to look at accelerators and to partner up with accelerators in your space. And then on the financing, it's always interesting to speak with the donors to leverage your own fund with public sector money, and they have done that, especially in the examples of the third-party funds. There's quite a lot of donor investment also coming in. And in principle, it could be interesting to tie in with impact investors and share deals. We haven't seen that happen so much. And in general, this whole landscape of support is still rather immature. So it's a new field and not very structured at the moment. Which is why, and this is where I end, we believe there's more work to be done to build the space, to understand, first of all, understand better what's needed, and build the know-how, to also bring this approach closer to the mainstream corporate venturing world, maybe link it to existing events, to have a conversation with the people who have this as their bread and butter. From the donor side, to develop more targeted financing mechanisms, although they've been able to come in. I think they are very focused on funding seed stage or new innovations, and not so much on the scale-up phase. So there's room to find better mechanisms there. And what I personally find particularly interesting is these third-party funds that can really make it easier for companies that are starting in this space to get engaged, to get a first idea of BOP markets, and to build on existing structures. And there's few of them today. There's none that I'm aware of in Germany. And I think there's more space for these third-party funds to emerge. So that was my part, basically just to put a frame to everything. I think for now, there's not really questions. It's all quite plain and clear, I hope. So I would directly hand over to Christophe for the example from Schneider Electric.
Thank you very much, Christy, for this very interesting presentation that I think covers very broadly all what is being done. So I am Christophe Poline. I have been working in Schneider Electric for many years, and I have been in charge of impact investment within Schneider Electric since 2009. So it's more than 10 years by now. Just to give you a bit of history, we set up our first impact fund in 2009, which is felt into the category of in-house fund. But we also opened this fund to some specific external partners because thanks to French law, we have French employees that are partners in this first impact fund. And we also have one other impact investor. This fund is quite small, it's about 10 million euros, and it's managing both impact in Europe, investing in energy poverty area, and it's also an impact fund investing in electricity access. It's a bit narrower than energy in the developing world. So when we started running this fund, we very soon discovered that we were far too small. So we initiated the creation of a third-party fund to fall into Christie categories in partnership with DFIs. So we created a dedicated structure with other LPs and set up an independent company to manage this fund. We manage, of course, to keep some links with Schneider, and especially by providing this fund and the portfolio company with pro bono technical assistance. This is a way that enables us to keep an eye on the market, understand what's going on, and so on and so forth. And based on those two experiences, we are now creating a third structure, which you have on the screen. So it will be a fund dedicated for access to electricity in South and Southeast Asia. It will be a fund with partners. So we are accommodating third-party partners, most of them being development bank, but we also will have a classical asset manager on board. And this fund will be managed by internally by a dedicated team. So here again, we are a sort of a blending structure between a third-party fund and an internal fund, which is also interesting. With this fund, it's first of all an impact fund. We target, of course, the development goal number 7, which is access to clean and affordable energy. But you probably all know that when you tackle energy, you tackle a lot of other possibilities. Everything around water that need energy, everything around education, everything around infrastructure. So there are a lot of issues that are impacted or unlocked thanks to access to energy. Maybe we could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So what we aim to do with this new structure is to get a bit further than what we used to do, and namely to try to invest in other part of the access to electricity value chain, which means that we want to boost SMEs and businesses that will provide a service that are enabled by electricity. For instance, we target companies that will provide irrigation pumps or even irrigation services. We are targeting companies that provide cold storage, and again, they can provide either the product or the service. So we have companies that just rent cold storage spaces, and we are also looking at companies that can provide genset replacement. So we try to get a bit down the value chain and help boost the businesses that are enabled by clean energy access. So that's a very important point in our thesis, that we definitely want to go beyond light and mobile phone charging and put electricity at work. The next one, please. Thank you. So just to give you a few details, we select our companies first of all on the impact. So we invest in mission-driven companies. We need to have a measurable social and environmental impact. It's something very important. It's one of the first discussions we have with the startups. Is okay, what do you want to measure and how do you want to measure it? Of course, we try to invest in companies that are sustainable financially, because without that there is no impact. We have also very keen, very stringent in terms of governance. As our partners are DFIs, we have a very strong push on our partners on governance. That's very, very important. And of course, one of the most important things is that we need to think we'll be able to work on a long-term basis with the management team of the startup. So this is how we select the company we invest in. We also invest, so we have rather small tickets because we invest in early stage companies. We want to remain a minority shareholders. Our aim is to help the business grow, not to manage the business. So we do not plan at first to buy the company afterwards. We always invest alongside co-investors. And Christy, very often we co-invest with Rassembleurs, for instance. So there are co-investment between impact investors, and we always want to have a board seat to make sure that we can influence what's going on in the company. Next one. It's the impact evaluation is something that is key for us, and as I said, it is one of the very first discussions we have with the company we invest in. But it's very important for us to make sure that this impact measurement, impact assessment, will not be detrimental to the company. So we make sure that we design the performance indicator together. We make sure that we agree on the targets, and we never ask the company to go beyond things that they would measure for themselves. If some LPs need to go further, of course, we are ready to help to set up studies, but not at the cost of the company. Next one. Okay, and so this is a quick description of our investment process, which goes from sourcing to exit. I'm sure that it will not teach anyone anything because it's a very classical investment process. The most important thing is that we try to have our exit strategy in mind from the very beginning. And exit is probably still the main issue we all have in impact investing, at least in the energy field. So we have seen some trade sales. We have seen some strategic investment. Christy mentioned Engie. Engie has bought Phoenix, but also Mobisol and also Simpa Network in India. We know that Shell is taking important stake in Delight, for instance. We know that Total also is taking stakes in this company. So strategic investors is an important route to exit today. We at Schneider Electric may also be an exit route, but then as we always have external LPs, this route is a difficult one because of conflict of interest. So it really needs to be well thought and well documented. And we are all dreaming some days of the possibilities of an IPO, but I think that neither the company nor the market is ready for that yet. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Christophe. There's one question here for you in the chat from Vaishali from Minergy. Is asking whether corporates are interested in blended finance approaches to help leverage their capital to enable clean energy companies to raise debt from crowd finance through matching funds or first loss guarantees.
Well, that's more than one question. In a sense, yes, we are interested in blended finance. The funds we create with DFI are a form of blended finance because you've got corporate money, and you also have DFI's money. DFIs also often come with the technical assistance facilities, so you also can say that there is some kind of subsidies. So yes, there is blended finance, but there is also a very interesting point is that we do need debt. That's something which has been a very difficult point for many companies, the capacity to raise debt. I am not sure crowdfunding would be the right solution because it's very expensive. Because there is an exchange risk to be taken. The company will be borrowing probably in local currencies, or at least the company needs to borrow in local currencies, which and it's difficult to manage such a risk on a crowdfunding basis. So it's we need debt, but I'm not sure crowdfunding would be the right solution. You start to see dedicated debt fund emerging. You have a company called Sunfunder, you have SEEA, I think Bamboo Finance, I'm not so sure of that, has launched a debt fund. Alpha Mundi has launched a debt fund, so debt is coming on the market through dedicated debt funds.
Mm-hmm. Great. And there's another question to you, Christophe, from Angela Melodia from SNAM Foundation. She's asking if Schneider Electric is still doing impact investing in Europe, and if you can give examples, or if you abandoned it completely for Southeast Asia or East Asia.
No, we are still doing impact investing in Europe, and that's the reason why we created a dedicated instrument for Southeast Asia. And in Europe, we are investing in companies that are fighting energy poverty. These companies are very often dedicated landlords, so which provide high quality, low rent houses to low income people. But we also invest in a company that is manufacturing emergency housing out of recycled sea containers. We are looking at companies that are providing information or efficient equipment to people. So the European part of the fund is very active.
Mm-hmm. Great. And I have one quick question before we move on to Karoline, picking up on your comment that you're co-investing with Rassembleurs d'Engie, and also speaking with other players in the impact investing in energy space for potential exits. Where do you exchange on potential investments and potential deals? Is this more like an informal network because there's just a few players, or how does this happen?
No, it's mainly an informal network, and but there are a lot of meetings and training that are organized, especially by Global Lighting, for instance. But you also have organizations such as EVPA, of course, and you have other family office association. So there's a lot of places where you can meet people and discuss, and then after that, of course, it gets on informal network.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you, Christophe. Then, Karoline, you are sharing the slides from your screen. So.
Yes, I will. See if this works. Does it work? Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Good, wonderful. Well then, thank you very much, Christina, for the introduction. And yeah, as she was saying, my name is Karoline. I work for EVPA, and I'm here today to give a little bit of another perspective also on the topic of impact venturing, and particularly where corporate impact venturing also meets corporate social investing. So that's me. I work at the European Venture Philanthropy Association as a corporate research manager. And for those of you that don't know the European Venture Philanthropy Association yet, we are a membership organization of around 300 organizations that want to create social impact by investing for impact. And what unites these organizations is the idea of using these practices of venture philanthropy. So that's on the one hand providing tailored financing, going beyond providing grants, but also thinking how debt or equity can support an investee depending on the needs of the organization. Also going further with the non-financial support. And Christophe just mentioned also how they really think about in the long term supporting these investee organizations by, with their board working together. So it's very much also building the organization in itself. And the last core practice is impact measurement and management. So within our 300 members, we also have a sub-community, which is called the Corporate Initiative. And for almost 2 years now, I've been working with our corporate social investors. And what we mean with that is, we really refer to all of our investors for impact that also share a relationship with the company. And that involves corporate foundations, corporate social accelerators, social businesses, shareholder foundations, and corporate impact funds. And what all of these members have in common is that they want to learn from each other and really help, by sharing best practices, by sharing failures also to advance their impact, not only individually, but also as a space and a collective of corporate social investors within Europe. Some numbers also about our community. We have nowadays 68 members, corporate social investor members, coming from 14 different countries. And as you can also see, the member types is quite diverse. So we have obviously the majority are corporate social investors, of which almost 2/3 are corporate foundation and corporate shareholders. But we also have some companies and financial institutions that are that joined our initiative. Before I go maybe a little bit more into the topic of corporate social investing, I also wanted to give a bit of an overview of what the trends and developments are that we've seen on a European scale emerging. And I think if we go back around, I don't know, maybe a decade or two, we could see that corporate social investors and companies have really been on two different planets. So we primarily saw corporate foundations in the European space that pursued more the traditional philanthropy approach, so providing grants to a number of small-scale initiatives. And then we had companies on the other side of the spectrum who were really driven by their for-profit motives, so really thinking about maximizing the profit for the company, but not really thinking about their impact on broader society. But what we see happening now is that corporate social investors are actually moving. So we see a lot of the corporate foundations, particularly that move from traditional philanthropy to this investing for impact. So really going beyond the providing grants, but also thinking how other financial instruments could benefit a social investee organization. Thinking again about impact measurement and management, or about what kind of non-financial support they can also provide to strengthen an entire organization rather than supporting an individual initiative. At the same time, we also see other types of corporate social investors emerging more and more, and these are the impact funds, these are corporate accelerators, social businesses, so really new types of legal structures also. And Christophe just gave a great example also how one company can incubate various impact funds. But also we see MAN, for instance, this year launched their first impact accelerator, Repsol launched their first impact funds. So we see also new types of these corporate social investors coming into the space. On the other side of the spectrum, we also have companies that are really moving from this finance-only objective and perspective towards a finance first. So they're obviously under a lot of societal pressure by consumers, by governments, investors, but also other stakeholders to now integrate a broader purpose and more of an inclusive business strategy within their overall strategy. And so as they're integrating more of these impact concerns into their business practices and business strategy, they're also moving closer towards the impact space. And I think this is what makes this time right now so interesting to also look at the topic of corporate impact venturing, corporate social investing, is because companies, while companies still have obviously primarily their profit motives and impact more as a secondary objective, corporate social investors still have their societal impact as the primary one. But because they're moving together, there are also now opportunities how they can start to think, can we actually work together? What are the opportunities of sometimes collaborating on different opportunities and different fronts? And the same goes true for then the practices of corporate venturing, what is now moving more into corporate impact venturing, and corporate social investing on the other side. So as Christina was already mentioning before, so the purpose of corporate social investing is really that it bears the societal relevance at the core, where corporate impact venturing is really thinking about, okay, also how can we combine that with the financial and the strategic objectives. But because there's this move in, there are also opportunities where these lines are becoming blurry and we're actually seeing different actors more on a spectrum. And this is really what I wanted to talk about today, in particular by focusing on the corporate social investors. So while they always have the social mission really at the forefront of all of their activities, there are also opportunities when sometimes one of these social innovations or business models they incubate can actually have a bigger influence also on the company's practices. And there, I think it's an interesting perspective to look, how can these actors, these corporate social investors, drive really this transformative, inclusive business models or transformative social solutions, which can then really be scaled and change also the way that the company creates social and environmental impact. So we've been conducting for a while now research on strategic alignment and also talking to a lot of our members. And what I would like to talk to you about today is also some of the observations that I have by talking to primarily corporate impact funds or accelerators, who now do not only want to create social impact as their primary goal, but also think about how they can actually have a positive influence on the business practices. And when we look at corporate social investors and their unique potentials, I think one of the primary potentials of them is really their long-term vision. So Christina also mentioned some of these structural problems that companies face in incubating impact ventures, such as the financial profitability motives. But corporate social investors do not have these limitations. They're not bound by the same structural problems. So they can actually really take on this long-term perspective and not only think about what is relevant for the business today, but they look at what is interesting or relevant for the business, not just tomorrow, but also in 2 years from now and 5 years from now, or even longer. And to give you an example here, I spoke, for instance, with Centrica Innovations, which is an impact fund from an UK-based international energy company. And what this impact fund is doing is really thinking about the long-term needs that are appearing in society and how they can use the resources, the capabilities, and the know-how from the companies to really address these emerging needs in society. And so the point for them is really to look further in the future, and their focus is more on anything that happens between a 3 to 10 year horizon. So really go much longer into this long-term vision than a company might adopt. And that then gives them the great opportunity of spotting these transformative social solutions or business models that can have a potential business relevance in not just tomorrow, like I said, but really in the long term. So going beyond the merits of what the company is currently focusing on, and exploring what else is happening in society and how can that have an impact on the inclusive or a sustainable business model. In line with that, companies or corporate social investors are also, because of their long-term vision, ideal in pushing a bit the boundaries of the company. So Christina also mentioned the example of Danone ecosystem, and I think Danone ecosystem is also a great example to explain how this can happen in practice. Because what happened is that, Danone, for instance, has a goal of sourcing 100% of its packaging and plastic in a circular manner, so all of this recycled. And so naturally they invest in recycling opportunities or innovations and business models. But the Danone Ecosystem Fund can actually look at this topic in the broader societal lens. So they do not only look at the environmental aspects, but for instance, they look at the entire ecosystem and what this recycling industry or the waste industry in itself can also do for society from another perspective. And in their case, they also particularly focused on the opportunities of a waste economy, helping people get a job, like become employed, officially employed by a structured organization, as a lot of these waste pickers currently work in the informal economy without any proper job protection or steady income or this social protection. So they started to invest in business models that also provide not only the opportunity to build the recycling infrastructure in developing countries, but also really take this inclusive ecosystem perspective of thinking, how can we also use that now to engage as many people as possible, provide them with a steady income and a steady job. Then the third, I think, unique potential of corporate social investors is also that they can test and develop early stage social innovations and business models. And that point goes hand in hand also with the fourth one, which is that they can provide risk tolerant and patient seed capital. So what we see also is that corporate social investors are ideally positioned to use their capital to think about what are these early stage innovations that maybe are currently beyond the radar of companies because they look for primarily for business models or solutions that already have a proof of concept. So what they can do is really go out there and explore a bit what are these, these great ideas that people have, but that don't have a current proof of concept yet. What can we do? What kind of financial and non-financial support can we offer those entrepreneurs so that they can actually become like a more developed organization, have a more professionalized social business model, and eventually can demonstrate the proof of concept for a company. And yes, so that's exactly where they can also bring in their seed capital, whereas companies then, once that might be successful, and I think we also heard great examples here now of when that happened, where companies can then really bring in the scale-up capital. So once there's a proven concept, they can think about how to integrate that within their value chain, and so thereby really help the enterprise and the inclusive business model to scale up and reach new, like a different, broader range of beneficiaries. So that was just a very brief introduction, from the European space. And I'm also ready to take any questions if you have some.
Yeah, and with this reminder, if you have questions, please type them into the chat. And as we wait for questions from the audience, I have one very practical question to you, Karoline. A lot of the organizations you speak with as corporate social investors are corporate foundations, and you talk quite a bit about these potential links between corporate social investors being able to invest with less restrictions, more early stage, more risky, and then the company potentially coming in when an innovation is more mature. How does this work effectively in the European context, where in many countries corporate foundations purposefully stay far away from the business of the mother company because of tax regulations? Are there good examples where this has worked, or does it mainly work kind of across corporates, that it's not the mother corporate that picks up the investment?
Great question. And I think what we see here, observing also, of course, that corporate foundations are really reconsidering their positioning. So a lot of them, as you said, traditionally stayed at arm's length. Now what we see is that the space is emerging, and a lot of corporate foundations are also thinking about what kind of impact do I want to have? And can I also within my legal boundaries have some kind of impact on the company and help them to become more sustainable or inclusive? However, also, again, as you mentioned, the legal boundaries are quite strict for corporate foundations. So for corporate foundations, it's often legally and ethically not possible to invest in these ventures, which can then be passed on to the company. So there are these legal restrictions where they have to be very careful, as they clearly have to serve the business, the public good primarily, and cannot serve mostly in a direct way, the business, or even in an indirect way. But what we see is that corporate foundations are, for instance, thinking about aligning on the industry. So also really taking this ecosystem perspective and looking at what is currently missing in the market or in the industry, what are the biggest social challenges, and what can we as a foundation do there? Because if you operate in the same industry, the benefits are for all. The idea is really to benefit all companies, to really help raise the sustainability bar, so to say, get everyone on board on being more sustainable and inclusive. But in that way, they can also use more of the company's competences, resources, and know-how to invest in social solutions. So they cannot really, there's no way of, let's say, locking in any innovation or solutions for their own related company. That's legally not a possibility for corporate foundations. But that's why we also see more and more of these impact funds, accelerators, and other types of corporate social investors emerging in this space right now.
Christophe, Poline speaking. If I may give a short example, for instance, in Europe, we have had the Schneider Foundation, which is a foundation under aegis of Fondation France, which means that they are very strictly regulated. They can subsidize and help an NGO tackling energy poverty, and help this NGO to create a social business into which afterwards the social impact fund can invest. So we have example where we can work together in partnership with the foundation without breaking any rules and without bringing donation money into business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to get creative. I see a question here from Tom Harrison from the Business Innovation Facility. He's asking whether there's a place for non-financial partnerships and collaboration between large companies and smaller ventures as a precursor to investment. Have you seen this model? So to start off, and I'll hand over to you both afterwards to come in. We've seen this a lot. Especially where there's this one-to-one relationship between a company and a social enterprise. Most of the examples we found were non-financial, which is why we haven't featured them in the report. But for what we've heard from the companies when we talked about those examples was that it's a lot easier for them to collaborate in this partnership mode without taking equity or without any financial transaction involved, because of all the complications with, first of all, legal and financially organizing a deal, and then also the internal targets around margins and so on. So many of them prefer to stay at this arm's length, and they still invest in the sense that they provide training and bring companies together. So one nice example that we've been collaborating with very closely is from Airbus, the Africa for Future accelerator. So it's Airbus's accelerator for startups in the aerospace space from Africa, many of which have an impact angle. And this is also a keen interest of Airbus because to them it's strategic. The SDGs are kind of the strategic framework where they are looking for their next opportunities. But they don't even have the ambition to take any sort of equity in these startups. They just want to have them in their ecosystem as partners, and for those startups to be compatible with the technical infrastructure that Airbus is providing, and to be using Airbus's services, but there's no intent to take them into the company. So it's quite a frequent arrangement indeed. And Karoline, Christophe, maybe you have other examples you can think of. Where there's no financial transaction, but there's just a partnership between the large company and the smaller venture.
There are examples like that, especially if you, in France, we can dedicate people to work within NGO or social businesses without without any financial relationships.
What I've seen sometimes, but now I cannot think of the organization who told me that, but it's kind of a way of also testing a little bit the grounds. So they provide non-financial support even before then going in with financial support as a means to kind of see if there's also match between the different organizations. How is the organization doing? It's a way of getting to know each other. And then once they feel like, okay, there's a good match and we feel like they're also ready now, then they come in and provide complementary financial support.
Great. Thank you very much. We've reached the end of our hour. Thank you very much to the contributors, Karoline and Christophe, for sharing your experience. Thanks to everyone who logged on. I see that quite a few people have not logged on, and so just to mention, the recording will be available also for those who've heard it already. And let us know if you want to receive the recording. Yeah, and hope to see you soon somewhere in the real world. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Christina.